The conference room had gone silent, so silent you could hear the soft tick of the clock on the far wall. Billionaire tycoon Ethan Cole, one of the most powerful men in New York's biotech world, had just collapsed in front of his board of directors. Doctors were scrambling. Investors whispered in panic. His assistant fumbled with her phone, calling the best specialists money could buy. And then, from the back of the room, a quiet voice cut through the chaos. "I can heal him in 2 minutes." Heads snapped toward the doorway. There she stood, a woman in a faded janitorial uniform, her mop bucket still beside her, sweat clinging to her brow. For a moment, the entire room froze. Then came the laughter. "A cleaning lady?" one investor scoffed. "This isn't a movie. Get her out." Security stepped forward, but the woman didn't flinch. She kept her gaze locked on the unconscious billionaire. She saw something the rest of them couldn't. Her name was Lena Brooks, 40 years old, a janitor who had spent the last 5 years working in Cole's Manhattan headquarters. To most, she was invisible, just another uniform blending into the glass and marble of the skyscraper. But Lena carried something no medical degree could measure. Her grandmother back in the Kentucky hills had been a folk healer, a woman who believed sickness wasn't always in the body, but sometimes in the soul. And Lena had inherited that gift, the ability to see pain where others saw nothing. Ethan Cole, 55, had built his empire from scratch. Born in Cleveland, educated at Harvard, he was known as the man who could cure the incurable. But tonight, as he lay on the floor of his midtown skyscraper gasping for air, all the medical brilliance in the world wasn't saving him. Lena had seen the signs for weeks while cleaning his office, his shaking hands, the stack of untouched prescriptions, the haunted way he stared at a photo of a little girl hidden in his desk drawer. Doctors saw symptoms. Lena smelled the same invisible decay she'd once smelled around her father before he died. Something deeper. Something human. Paramedics rushed Ethan to Mount Sinai Hospital, sirens wailing through Manhattan streets. But by midnight, the brightest doctors had no answers. His immune system was collapsing without reason. Machines beeped, numbers fell, and whispers grew. The billionaire was dying, and no one could explain why. But inside Ethan's mind, as fever and delirium consumed him, he was somewhere else. He was back on the streets of Chicago years earlier, clutching the tiny hand of his daughter Emily. The flash of headlights. The scream. The SUV. He had pulled her close, but not fast enough. She was 7 years old. And in his dream she whispered, "Daddy, you saved the world, but you couldn't save me." Ethan jolted awake, drenched in sweat. For the first time in years, he admitted the truth. He wasn't just sick. He was guilty. Meanwhile, Lena sat in her small Queens apartment, her grandmother's old notebook open on the kitchen table. On one yellowed page, the words stared back at her. Grief, when buried too deep, claws its way out through the body. She couldn't shake the image of Ethan's pale face, or the way his eyes had flickered toward her in the boardroom, desperate, almost begging. She wasn't supposed to interfere. She wasn't supposed to care. But something inside told her, if she didn't act, he wouldn't survive the week. The next day, Lena borrowed a spare uniform, clipped on a fake hospital badge, and slipped into Mount Sinai. She moved like a shadow, pushing a mop bucket through gleaming corridors. No one looked twice. After all, janitors were invisible. When she reached Ethan Cole's private suite, guarded by security, her heart pounded. She knocked once, twice, then pushed the door open. Inside, Ethan lay motionless under fluorescent lights, machines tracing the fragile rhythm of his heartbeat. His face, once commanding, now looked fragile, broken. Lena walked closer, pulled a tiny vial of lavender oil from her pocket, a remedy her grandmother had sworn by to open restless hearts, and dabbed it onto his pillow. Then she whispered, "You're not dying of disease, Mr. Cole. You're dying of a heart that's never been allowed to heal." His eyes flickered open, icy blue meeting hers. Who are you?" he rasped. "Lena," she said softly. "I've cleaned your office for years, and I've listened. You've let doctors examine your body, but you've never let anyone touch your grief." For the first time in a decade, Ethan said his daughter's name aloud. Emily. His voice cracked, breaking like glass. Tears filled his eyes, and Lena nodded. "Until you forgive yourself, your body will keep shutting down. But you can choose differently, right now." And then the twist no doctor could explain happened. That night, Ethan's vitals stabilized. The trembling stopped. His fever broke. By morning, his blood pressure was normal. Machines still blinked, but his body had started to heal itself. The medical team was baffled. Lena was gone. But the story didn't end there. Days later, Ethan's assistant received an anonymous email with Lena's file attached. Old mistakes, arrests for trespassing, firings for emotional manipulation. A warning: be careful who you trust. Doubt crept in. Was she a fraud? Had she preyed on his weakness? For a week, Ethan avoided her name. He buried himself in work, rebuilt his walls, and told himself he was fine. But deep down, he knew his healing hadn't come from medicine. It had come from her words. One night, cleaning his penthouse desk, Ethan found something he thought he had lost: a crumpled birthday card scrawled in messy handwriting. To Daddy, I forgive you. Love, Emily. His hands trembled, not with sickness this time, but with something deeper: forgiveness. The next morning, Ethan asked his assistant to track Lena down. They met at a small coffee shop in Brooklyn. She wore no uniform, just a simple sweater, her auburn hair falling loose. For a moment, they just stared at each other. No billionaire, no janitor, just two broken souls who had seen too much. Thank you for coming, Ethan said quietly. Lena smiled faintly. You're looking better. Physically, yes, he admitted, but I think I'm only beginning to heal. Silence stretched between them until Ethan added, I used to think you appeared at my weakest moment, but now I realize it was the only moment I was strong enough to finally listen. 3 months later, New York was buzzing with news of a new foundation, the Emily Cole Healing Initiative. Unlike Ethan's biotech empire, this one wasn't about drugs or machines. It was about grief counseling, community healing, holistic therapies, programs the medical world had dismissed for too long. At the launch event, when reporters asked why a billionaire was funding something so unscientific, Ethan simply said, because I survived thanks to someone the world refused to believe in. And if you think strength only comes from wealth, titles, or credentials, this story might make you think again. Sometimes the person who saves us isn't the one with a stethoscope or a billion-dollar lab. Sometimes it's the invisible hand of someone who sees the pain no one else dares to name. Because healing doesn't always begin in hospitals. Sometimes it begins with the courage to listen to the silent scream of a heart in pain.